Okay, everyone. This is a presentation video aimed specifically at discussing mise en scène, the terms that you were to study for this week in relation to the Guild. So, first of all, mise en scène is a French term that literally means to put in the scene. And so the five things that we're going to focus on here, the five components of mise en scène are costume, setting and decor, lighting, space, and acting. Those are the five categories of mise en scène. And one of my favorite things to do when discussing mise en scène is to look at the costumes and to analyze what the costumes tell us about the characters. Again, we all know that clothing is a technology. According to McLuhan, it is an extension of ourselves. And one of the things that clothing does is that it communicates messages about who we are, what age we are, what our beliefs are to people at a distance. And, sometimes people read the clothing incorrectly, but most of us, I think, are pretty adept at reading the symbolism based in clothing. For example, the fact that Codex is wearing her pajamas with orange fuzzy slippers in a public restaurant tells us something about her, that that she's probably young, that she's probably a bit whimsical, that that she's probably unemployed or off her rocker just a little bit, because most of us who are above the age of 2 do not wear our pajamas out in public, and certainly not to a restaurant. So it also could be, if you take the clothing along with the storyline, it could show us that she's doing something very important. So important that she had to rush out of her house without even bothering to change her clothing. So the symbolism of a costume does change within context, but we're going to be looking at this. And it's also interesting that Vork is always wearing a suit. These annotations provide us with a lot of information about the decisions that the directors and the writers were making and the producers throughout the course of creating the Guild. And as it notes here, that they rarely purchase wardrobe items. This is common with online web series, especially in the beginning when they're trying to get funding. The actors will wear their own clothes, but this was towards the end of the series, and they were getting or the end of the first season when they were getting a bit more money. But the annotations told us in the very beginning of the season that one of the first purchases they made was Vork's suit. And of course, since Vork is unemployed, it creates an interesting contrast between how he sees himself and his actual real professional identity. He sees himself as a leader, as a business person, as a man, a masculine man, but in reality, what he is a stay-at-home paranoid gamer. So that's kind of an ironic costume choice for him. I also really appreciate this eye shield that Vork wears and the headphones with duct tape on them. Again, the annotations told us that they specifically chose to put the duct tape on the headphones in order to stress that Vork is a person who refuses to invest in anything, that he's, super hyper paranoid about economy and economizing. Also, the green eye shield underscores that he's sort of a relic, a throwback to the past, somebody who is not connected with the current fashion trends and in ways that we do things, even though he is a 21st century gamer. Now, remember, I just want to stress this again, that we're going back, or we will consistently be going back and revisiting the ideas that we've established from the beginning of the semester, and that McLuhan tells us that the medium is the message. So costume, lighting, space, decor, setting, these are all technological extensions of ourselves. And we need to keep thinking about how these extensions create changes to the scale, pace, or pattern of our lives. This all falls under the umbrella of technological determinism. which Donna Haraway, the author of the Cyborg Manifesto, is also a technological determinist. You can tell that from what we learned from her article, and I'll be touching on that some more here this week and in the weeks to come. So, mise en scène. I can't make this screen larger for some reason. Mise en scène. One thing I wanted to talk about is, in addition to costume, is setting and decor. Okay, so with setting and decor is basically just, again, a French term for furnishings. What's important with web series is that oftentimes they're set within bedrooms, specifically because most people, especially young people who are living in small apartments or have roommates, keep their computers in their room, and then they tend to be the primary persons who are recording themselves. So we do tend to see this trend within web series that they're set in somebody's bedroom. And then, of course, the bedroom tells us a lot about that person's personality and personal life. Here we can see, just by looking at the bedspread, that Codex, the character, is single, that only one person has slept in her bed last night because the covers are only turned back on one side. You can also kind of infer that she is probably single and not living with somebody because there are clothes thrown around. So that also indicates that she is a messy person. This violin case back here on the bed, you'll notice that the violin case is in almost every shot when she's in her bedroom. And Felicia Day, the woman who plays Codex, is actually an accomplished violinist. And so is her character Codex, because her character Codex is loosely based on her own experiences, on Felicia Day's own experiences. You can also see here in the background all of these books that show us that she is somebody who's probably intellectual and or is a student or has been a student. We know she is not currently a student. She is an unemployed person. She does have curtains, which shows that she's somebody who invests in feelings of comfort. Again, her bedspread also shows that she's interested in creating an environment that is comfortable and pleasing and also soothing. I think that this is a guitar over here on a stand, but I can't be quite sure. We would have to look at some more footage and see what it is. And then we have the chair here. And the chair, of course, shows that it's utilitarian, it's functional, it's also a bit whimsical and old-fashioned. And so all of these are clues to what we are supposed to think about the character. The way that our cultural cues that we've established here in the United States, the way that our culture runs, we read our furniture, our clothing, our settings, and they tell us something about each of the characters that we're viewing. It's very important to pay attention to those details, either when you're watching video or recording it yourself. Now, for example, Zabu's mom here. We have Zabu's mom, and the annotations tell us that because, again, they had a low production budget, that the actress Vigi brought all of her own personal saris to wear as Zabu's mom. And she says, thank God, because we had no budget for wardrobe. Now, again, the saris that Zabu's mom wears establish her as somebody from the continent of India, correct? So the wearing of the sari is very important. Otherwise, if we stuck her in jeans and a sweatshirt, she would look like she was from the United States. But again, her costume immediately places her as somebody who was born in another country and probably adheres to cultural ideas that are, if not in conflict with, distinctly different from American ideals of, what a mother-parent-son relationship should be. This sets up the comedic role, the comedic relationship between Zabu and his mom, because he's always trying to break away from her. And they do over-exaggerate, what would be considered cultural norms within the narrative, and that's typical, of course, when you're aiming for comedy. Now, also, you can see here the setting and the decor. She's in a kitchen. She is cooking. She's cooking blintzes, apparently because the actors really wanted blintzes, and they figured if they could film her cooking blintzes, then they could eat them afterwards. But this clearly establishes her as a maternal figure, right? The mother who comes, who cooks, who takes care of her child, even in a protective and overbearing way. I also like back here in the background the pineapple light that is attached to the wall. Again, that shows that Felicia Day's character Codex is somewhat whimsical. We also have, it's hard to tell what they are, but figurines in the window, again underlining Codex's sort of feminine and girlish, almost childish affiliation with figurines, with dolls, even though she is an adult who owns such things as spatulas, spaghetti strainers, a kettle, bowls back here. She has a blender. I'm sure a lot of you are wishing that you had those in your apartments right now. So she is not just an adult who has adult things, but she's also young at heart. Now, I did want to point on this because, again, the annotations are really interesting. This is a bindi that Zabu's mom has here, located between her eyes on her forehead. And the annotations point out that a lot of Westerners think that this means that a woman is married. But it is true that the bindi is worn not just by single women, but also at times by men. And what it really represents is your third eye or spiritual enlightenment. So it's good to have cultural knowledge and to do some research if you're unsure what something means. I've done a lot of research actually into Indian clothing with the films that I've studied over the years, and I've learned a lot about their culture. And so a little bit of research can go a long way when you come up across something you're not sure exactly what it is or what it symbolizes. Some things we kind of know from the offset, and other things we just have to do a little bit more in-depth seeking. Now, again, I want to emphasize the importance of costume and setting here, because we can differentiate between the characters by their costume choices. If we switch costumes, any of these characters, we would perceive their character differently. And here, I think what's interesting is the decor also, the attention to detail, the American cheese that Vork brings with him. His agenda, which is inside of a folder, shows us that he is not just cheap and has bad taste in food, because American cheese is not actually cheese at all and is disgusting and cheap, but the folder also shows that he's, an anal retentive person, somebody who you probably don't want to hang out with. He also has a binder here. And then, here we have Clara, who's dressed like a soccer mom. Zabu as a young, unemployed, kind of geeky, with a misshapen t-shirt on. And then, of course, Codex, who seems a little bit more responsible at this moment because, of course, she's not in her pajamas. She's in a traditional feminine shirt that's also a little revealing. So it's emphasizing her femininity here in this scene. And then we have Tink's, or Blade's arm cutting off the scene. But also importantly, you notice that we have a water, I believe that is Codex's tea, another water, a water, and then we have only one martini, or I guess this is a cosmopolitan. One cosmopolitan glass here. In other scenes, you can see in front of Clara, there's 2, 3, 4 glasses. This shows that, Clara has an alcohol problem, that she's cramming down very potent drinks, also kind of girly drinks. They're very sweet during the middle of the day and while she's taking care of her children. So these details are important in establishing character and also developing characters and pushing along the narrative visually in a way that you don't have when you're dealing in a medium that doesn't have as much print involved in it. So we get these clues as we watch. So do make sure that you're not multitasking too much and not looking at the screen while you're watching these videos, because there's a wealth of information. All right, I'm going to pause for now and start over in the next video.